Okay, hi guys. So today we're going to talk about how to achieve like a really communicative or impactful essay. I mean, like, how do you do that in terms of mentality, right? So a lot of people think like a good essay starts with a really good topic or a really good writing style, but in reality, like, to get to that good essay, you really need a good mentality when you're starting. So that's what we're going to talk about today, like how to foster that mentality and how I did that as well. I'm Talia, and I've been reading college essays for like the past couple of years. I'm a junior in college now at Duke University, and I'm studying biomedical engineering, but I can talk more about like my application journey and all of that because I was really into applying colleges. Like, I had fun doing it, I guess, which is kind of makes sense why I'm like really into advising people today. When I was applying to college, my headspace was not encouraged by other people. I didn't really watch a lot of college YouTubers yet. I didn't look for college essay advisors. I didn't really do any of that because I didn't know that those were things. I was just really lucky in terms of how I approached my essays without like a lot of advice or guidance. And for me, because I knew that like the admissions process involved other people reading my essays and reading what I had to say, I knew that I was looking for, or I knew that I needed to make that person who was reading my essay like me. And I felt like in order to do that, like I needed, like when they read it, they had to like me a lot. Like they read my essay and was like, wow, I want to be this person's best friend, or like, wow, this, like, like have that strong draw to me as a person, which sounds like it's pretty crazy. I don't know why my headspace was there because I had no idea how to achieve it. Like, I was a very STEM heavy nerd. It wasn't like I'm a master at like writing or anything, but I knew that like those were the feelings that I wanted to elicit when someone read my essay, because like that was so only real differentiator that you can have when everyone's equivalent stats wise and like achievement, leadership, blah 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 blah. Like all of those are pretty common things that students achieve nowadays. So like having an essay that's very personable is kind of what makes the difference. I think a lot of people have that mentality like, oh, I want to elicit like strong feelings, or I want to elicit some sort of emotion, but they haven't nailed exactly like what kind of emotion that they wanted to elicit. I knew that I wanted to elicit like, a draw, like a very personable attraction to me in my essays. And I feel sometimes people gravitate towards eliciting like using imagery to be very emotive in their writing, and thinking that will make someone like you a lot or like achieve something in your essay. So what I most commonly see when I read essays is people will over dramatize things that don't necessarily need to be over dramatized. And I guess the best example or like type of thing that you don't want to over dramatize is something that's like really gross or gory. Because at the end of the day, if you're talking about like how somebody was bleeding out and you're narrating like the colors of the blood and like the smell and the fumes and like how you touched it or something like that, whoever's reading your essay at the other end is going to think either A, this person is really dramatic, or B, since these essays are supposed to be about you and help readers get to know you, they're going to think this person's really gross. So like that's why it's not great to focus on those elements, because, or to not like over dramatize anything really, because it's going to not represent who you are accurately, and it might send the wrong message at the end of the day. And it's really hard because like we know that as an admissions process, it's really easy to fall into the mentality, okay, I need to impress the person that's reading the essay, or okay, I need to make a good impression. And you'll fall into the traps or scenarios where you're not going to get something that actually accurately reflects you. So I definitely wasn't immune to over dramatizing things, even though I knew that I wanted to like be as authentic and personable as I could. So that definitely happened with essays. And I remember specifically with one of my Yale supplementals. I did not get in, by the way. I would probably, because my supplementals were not as great as some of the ones for my other schools. So one of my Yale supplementals was, where do you draw, like how do you get your inspiration, or like what do you do that inspires you? And honestly, I was not lying when I came up with my answer, because it's true. I get all of my good ideas while I'm in the shower. Like I came up with the idea, sit down, film this video, and knew what I wanted to talk about, like the kind of, trajectory of this conversation while I was in the shower. So I tried to tell Yale that, but I did not do that in the best way. Like, I don't know. I just didn't do it in a way that anyone should go about doing it. I should have pulled it up so that I could read it, but I remember that I tried to talk about how like each dewdrop of the shower that landed on my skin was what gave me inspiration. And I was just narrating water falling in a shower, and it had nothing to do, that was like, it had nothing to do with personal about me. Like I didn't tell them any of the good ideas that I ever got in the shower. If like I think at the time I honestly was probably making stuff up. Like I thought, whatever. I don't remember why I was inspired to write that. Maybe I came up with it in the shower, I don't know. But basically I didn't talk about anything that was personal to me. I didn't talk about any of the ideas that I came up with. I just spent the whole time like using this crazy metaphor of how water gave me inspiration. So yeah. And definitely someone reading that would either think, A, this person was being way too dramatic and not being personable, which was true, or B, this person is weird, which is also partially true, but that's fine. So yeah, that's just like, a heat of warning. Like don't over dramatize the things that you don't necessarily want to, emphasize, because at the end of the day, those things aren't personal to you. So that's the most important part. So how do you make something personal to you is the question that a lot of people get. And what I've learned, or what I figured out, is that the best way to make something personal to you is to utilize storytelling. So what that means, especially for supplemental essays, when they're asking like, oh, what's an example of your leadership experience, or what's your favorite extracurricular, or like what's what was one of your most significant challenges, use that space to actually tell a story, as opposed to just saying what you did or like what happened. To elaborate, what I mean by that is, if you're talking about one of your favorite extracurriculars, and say that was either math club or baseball, instead of talking about like just the positions that you held, or like the experiences you gained, or the skills that you learned from those experiences, tell one of your tell a story of like some really memorable experience like in that activity. So like sorry, if in math club you ever did any like overnight trips, or like you had this like really funny times with your friends, or like that's how you made friends, maybe through math club. Or I don't know, I'm making up things because I did math club in middle school, not high school, so I don't remember a lot, but I definitely like made friends in math club, and that's what like made it fun going and stuff.
Hi guys, this is editor me hopping on because I wanted to spill some tea just now, because I remember I did do math club in like middle school, and I just remembered a story that I wanted to share. And this is also why I talk about this a lot. It's really important to brainstorm early and then revisit what you're talking about or what you've written down later, because then you'll have those eureka moments and remember, oh, I have more content that I can talk about. So anyways, I remember in 5th grade is when I first started math club, and you could only have teams of 4. And so all of my friends that I had from elementary school like already made their own team of 4. So then I had to find like a new group of kids to work with. And I ended up being stuck at a team of 3 with 2 guys that I didn't know very well. But from that moment I like realized like the value of interacting with guys in math related STEM fields, because it's so like male dominated currently. But I don't know, I just had a lot of fun interacting with like their different mindsets and stuff. And we were the underdogs, nobody thought we were going to do well, yada yada, but we actually did pretty well on our own, which was really fun. And one of them is like, I still talk to him today. We're like friends. We play video games all the time. It's really fun. But yeah, I think that was like a really formative moment for me, like getting out of my comfort zone, trying something new. I'm an engineer now, so maybe that like had something to do with like me wanting to like go down that STEM path and not really being afraid to, do it. Yeah, so I just wanted to drop that story in there to show There's lots of stuff to talk about, and like give yourself space and time to think those things like through and review them. Essentially, give yourself time to let ideas marinate, and so that you can have come back with those eureka moments later. Okay, bye. Carry on with the video now.
But I would tell like a specific story, like, you know, how you made that friend or blah blah blah, and then kind of go from there. And the reason why that's so valuable is because you're using real things that happen to you, real things that you experience, and telling your reader that, the admissions officer, and that's how they get to know you. They're like, wow, this is like something that you've experienced, this is how you interact, and they can see from your story like, okay, this is how you interact with people, and they can see from your story, okay, this is your personality, you're a little bit shy, but like these things help you come out of your shell. And we know like maybe you want to major in math, and like, wow, you're, that will help them know like this is like really foundational for your personality and something that you probably are really good at, not just like on paper, but like internally as well. And they would get that from like, you know, the value of your experience in that story you share. And they wouldn't really get that if you just straight up told them, I like math a lot. And I, because I went to math club like 2 hours a week, every week for 4 years. And at the end, I was like the secretary of math club. Like those things are not going to get as much personableness if you, as opposed to you just telling that story. And that's why I mentioned earlier to not over dramatize like really, you know, grotesque things or metaphors, because those aren't going to help your readers get to know you at all. And because they're reading these essays with the intent of getting to know you, that's what they want to do when they're reading your essays. If you're over dramatizing the wrong things that aren't actually important or valuable to you, they might think like, okay, this might be the only, this is your personality, or like this is what you care about and stuff, and that might not accurately reflect you. I think storytelling is obviously really difficult to do when there's a word count in college essays. So that might be like your next question is like, how do I do that with the word count? How do I do it so that it reads good? How do I do that so it sounds good? Yada yada. My first piece of advice is don't even try. Don't try to do the word count. Don't try to make it sound good. Don't try to make it like pretty. Just make sure that you have the story down on paper first, right? Because the first draft is not ever going to be your best draft. You just want to have the actual content down first. Like you want to make sure that you know what you're going to talk about and make sure that you recall the story accurately and stuff, and then you can kind of edit from there. Okay, which pieces of the story aren't as important, aren't as valuable. So you can do this either by bullet pointing or word vomiting the whole thing first and then cutting down later. You can kind of bullet point like outline, outline, outline. I don't know. It's just kind of like making, I guess, like a schedule. Like if you're going to say like, oh, I'm going to, you know, wash the dishes today, then I might indent and be like, forks first, knives next, blah, 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 blah. Use water, soap, blah, blah, blah. Then I'll add all the details under like that overall heading to like whatever story or activity that I'm talking about. Because that's easier for me. It's kind of like word vomiting, but more abridged. Like I don't have to like narrate like everything that as I recall it. I can just kind of like organize all the details in bullet points and then put it into word form when I start my essays. So that's like one strategy that you can use. And then the last and final thing that I think is going to like help you get this, the key mentality before you start your essay writing, is making sure that you're authentic as possible, as authentic as possible, right? So maybe like what that means is like don't make up stories that didn't happen. Don't like flub details and things that don't necessarily happen unless it's for clarity or like making things shorter, obviously. But like just don't make up like monumental things that happened in your life that didn't really happen in your life, because it can come across in your essay because it's less like your writing is going to be less personable, and if they find out that it's not true, then that's also really bad. But not even just authenticity in terms of what you're writing about, like the story that you're telling, but you also want to be authentic in terms of the stories that you choose to tell. the ones that you know that you have. So don't pick stories that you think like, oh, I'm going to talk about the time that I won this whole tournament, or the time that I, you know, was nominated for this thing, because that's going to make me look more impressive, that's going to make me look more outstanding or something like that. You don't want to, like, as opposed to choosing the stories like, oh, this is the time when my friends and I did really something really like fun or stupid like the night before the big tournament, or like this is like, you know, something that I got to share with my dad in prepping for that big tournament, blah blah blah, because they're probably going to have your achievements listed down already, right? But talking about, you know, the stories of leading up to it, or like just the things that you remember that are like, oh yeah, I could talk about that, could show like, okay, you have a really great bond with your dad, and you're obviously really dedicated to this thing just by talking about the story of like, you know, the process of you working on it. But like obviously don't story tell about the process of you like creating this thing or leading up to this thing if there is no story, right? You want to still pick things that are engaging and fun to talk about. And so actually, this leads to me, I already did like a video on this in terms of crafting your personal statements, which also applies to supplemental essays, which I will link down below. But the gist of that video was talking about like, choose stories that you would maybe tell on like a first date, or choose stories that you would tell with that same like intent, or like meeting anybody for the first time, really. Because like we already know, we have like either from reading books or watching TV or movies or whatever, we have this preconceived notion like, okay, obviously you don't want to be too show-offy or braggy when you're meeting someone for the first time. You just want to, you know, be yourself, and you want to tell them stories like, oh yeah, when I was a kid, like I used to ride horses all the time, and blah 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 blah. Or like things like, I used to be a majorette growing up when I was a kid, and like that didn't really have any effect on me like later in my life, I don't think. I think that's just like a fun fact, which is also okay, great. So this is a teachable moment. Don't force yourself to like come up with an idea and commit it to it like in the moment. If it's helpful to like do things incrementally, do that. Just like one day, you know, jot stuff down, and then don't look at it for a couple days, and then go back to it, because that's how our brains learn. Actually, it needs time to marinate. And your subconscious mind is always running and it's always working. So if you at least start by looking at the prompt, like start by looking at the prompts that you need to do, and start by like writing like, okay, here are things that I can maybe do for that prompt, whatever, and then leave it alone. Your subconscious brain is like, okay, how can I do that? How can I like, you know, elaborate on that more, blah blah blah, while you're doing other things, right? You don't realize that you're still thinking about it in the back of your head, and then when you go, and then you're gonna have those, that's how we get those eureka moments, and we're like, oh, because we our subconscious, even though we weren't thinking about it, like, you know, we were reminded of it. That happened to me a lot during the essay writing process. So I think that's why it's helpful to start early, but also like space things out so that you can like do it over time, so that you can actually like let those ideas flow, and then you can come up with really great stuff. That was a lot in one video. But yeah, so obviously, like, you guys can leave comments in the questions down below. You can find me on my website, which is also linked down below. And also follow my Instagram. I don't post that much as I should, but I'm really gonna try to start posting them things that are more like random tips and stuff that I come up with, so that you guys can, you know, have those when you're writing your essays. And thank you for watching this video. Bye.